Good morning. We are live coffee with Rich. This morning, as you can see, I've got an in-house guest, my good friend Gage Cobb. And just in a moment, I'm going to ask Gage to introduce himself. But before I do, good morning and welcome to Coffee with Rich. My name is Rich Brown, co-host and co-founder of the American Warrior Society and the American Warrior Show, America's leading self-defense podcast. Please stay tuned to the end of this for all of our sponsors like Mountain Man Medical. Get all your trauma needs met. And by the way, we are coming up with our own American Warrior Society trauma kit. So stay tuned for that. We've also got amazing sponsors like Precision Holsters, makers of the Ultra Appendix holster that I use, and I'll be using their competition line tomorrow at a USPSA match. Also check out Century Martial Arts, the Bob XL, your striking needs. We've got another amazing sponsor, Appalachian Standard, making of the finest CBD products that money can possibly buy. My good friend Jesse Ross and his family are growing custom hemp products in the beautiful mountains of Asheville, North Carolina. Check them out as well. You can find all of our sponsors easy enough just by going into the day's show notes and clicking on the link that says American Warrior Show. We've got discount codes for every single one of our amazing sponsors. Please check them out, AmericanWarriorShow.com. And thank you to everybody that's joining me live. Looks like we got 10 folks that have already jumped on. Please like and share. We are in my pub this morning here in the Cumberland Plateau. This is my little man cave, if you will. And I'm so excited to have Gage on with me this morning. Gage has an incredible story to tell and lots of lessons for you guys to learn out there. So please like and share. Looks like we're up to about 20 people. Will is on. Alan is on. Says, good morning from occupied Virginia. Coin number 1571. If you want to know what a coin number is, check out AmericanWarriorSociety.com and find out if becoming a member of our community is what you need. We have everything for your self-defense needs on there. Stephen Washington, one of the finest instructors I've ever had the privilege of working with, is on this morning. Good morning. Gerald is on. Dan is on. Brett. Guile from the Philippines. Good morning, Guile. He says, good morning, Rich, Gage, and everybody. Nice man cave. Thank you, brother. 20 people joining us live. Please like and hit that share button before we get going because you're not going to want to miss today's show. Once again, my good friend, Gage Cobb. Good morning, brother.
Good morning. 254.
254?
That's my coin number.
Oh, is it really? Okay. 254. He's an OG. Hey, so I asked Gage to be on the show a long time ago. He's been kind of avoiding this.
254.
Yeah. I've been wanting him to come on the show, but he's led an extremely busy life, and he's going to tell us all about that this morning. Gage and I met, when was that?
2015.
2015.
February 2015.
We were in the Valentine's Day ice storm together. He was a brand new disaster program manager, and that was not a good time.
Brand new. That was my first day.
Oh, my God. First day of the Red Cross in the midst of a disaster operation. It was not fun. Tell us about yourself, Gage.
I grew up in Alabama. Pretty middle-class life, so everything was kind of normal, and I decided to upend that with joining the Marine Corps. I stuck around until I was about 22. After September 11th happened, I decided I would join. I had some inklings to join earlier and never had, and my brother had joined in August of that year, and then as September 11th happened, I just kind of decided that I was going to live with a lot of regret if I didn't go ahead and join. And so I joined the Marine Corps. I spent the first 4-ish years as an infantryman, but also trained in in the security guard world. I went up to Bangor, Washington, and did strategic weapons security there. And then I moved over to the intel field, and I did counterintelligence and human intelligence until I got out in late 2014, early January 2015. So I was in for a total of about 13 years. And I left that and thought I had a good job lined up. And of course, the transition from military life to civilian life is challenging. I hope some others have had that experience and maybe we'll comment on how difficult that can be. But essentially in the search, I had a good friend who works in the Red Cross. His mother's actually kind of a very well-established, well-respected person within the Red Cross. And so he turned me on to the Red Cross. And That's when I came up to Nashville, and I was commuting between North Alabama and Nashville at the time. I spent about a year working with the Red Cross, and then um, a friend of mine from the Marine Corps who had ties into the entertainment industry at the time gave me a call and asked if I would come out and work in the protective services world, which was my original intent when I left the Marine Corps. And he had known that, and he had found an opportunity for me. And so I was excited to get that opportunity. And I did not understand or appreciate at the time what that opportunity would be. So I followed that up, and I've been doing that for almost 5 years now. And that pretty much covers it. It's been an interesting journey.
Well, we're going to dig into that here in just a minute, but I'm going to break apart some of the. Is the volume okay this morning, guys? I know that we've got a different setup than we normally use. Let me know if the volume's good, if we need to speak up or turn it down a little bit. We got 24 folks joining us live. Please hit that share button. When you joined the Marine Corps, you were guarding strategic weapons at Bangor. Then you went to the infantry, regular infantry, right?
Yeah. Very briefly, I went to 3-8 for about 6 months. And, you know, it's strange because I made some really good friends there. And just a little tidbit, it's something that we had never really talked about much. But, you know, as far as, you know, veteran life and veteran suicide rates and things like that, you know, I think a lot of from my experience, a lot of the challenges that guys face is from survivor's remorse more than anything else. And my experience at 3-8 has more to do with that and any struggles that I have more than anything else. The group that I was a part of there ended up going to Ramadi as I lap moved. And what I thought I was doing was getting ahead of the game and preparing my lap move package that I would deploy with 3-8, and then I would come back and conduct the lap move. But the CI human field at the time was hurting so bad for bodies that they actually pulled me away from 3-8, like on the deployment. You know, we were getting on the buses to go to 29 Palms, to go to CAX, or the new version of CAX. And then we were to deploy, come back for pre-deployment leave, and deploy immediately. So within less than a month before we were set to deploy, I'd done the entire workup between their Fallujah and Ramadi deployments. I assimilated with them and got to know those guys really, really well. And I was at 3-8 Weapons Company. I had a truck, you know, driver and a 16-man, and we had a dock in my truck and a gunner. And that truck ended up getting blown up in Ramadi. And so, you know, for a bit of time, and still to this day, Tim Roos, I feel like, was sitting in my seat. And it sucks because, you know, he ended up, he had a child during that deployment that never met him. And he was an incredible guy. And of course we lost Adam, our driver, and Enrique Sanchez, our 16-man, and then Doc Pocious lost his foot in that accident. And Matos was the gunner. Matos is not my gunner, but he was in the gun that day and suffered a concussion from it. But yeah, triple stack IED, they just rolled over it in Ramadi there. And and that was a tough thing. But that was my 3-8 experience. Was there were a lot of great guys, and they were hit really, really hard in Ramadi. And as they're for the CI human field, and so that's how quickly the turnaround was going at that time. We needed bodies so bad that by the time I could even get through the training, get through the school, we were on a 6 to 7 month rotation. My unit was already rotating out, so I had gone through the indoctrination.
Well, let's pause right there, because you're using some acronyms that I want to make sure we explain.
Sure.
You said CI human a couple of times, so can you explain what that word?
So CI human is counterintelligence and human intelligence. What happened was, back in the early 2000s, there are two distinct fields. So the intelligence world is comprised of different intelligence disciplines, as we kind of break it out on the military side, and I'm sure other places do as well, but at least on the military side, you have different versions of intelligence. You have signals intelligence, you have GeoInt, which is geospatial intelligence. You have, the intelligence analyst. So you have these different intelligence disciplines. As we know it, it's broken down by MOSs. It's O2, in my case, O211, O231, O241, O251. You can look them up if you're really that curious about what all the the intelligence disciplines are. But open source intelligence is one on the civilian side that gets a lot of credence because it's the most available. You can go to the internet and search through open source intelligence. So human intelligence was just simply a single discipline of the broader scope intelligence effort. And on the military side, of course, that effort is geared towards gathering information about your adversary. The counterintelligence side is almost a separate discipline in that you're simply countering the enemy's efforts to gather that information on you. So there's everything in this intelligence bucket, and then there's the counterintelligence side that's just simply trying to dissuade the enemy or disinform or provide information that would mislead the enemy in some way. Or there's several methods and means to do those things, but basically it's an effort to keep them from gathering information about us, in order to be able to either attack us or lead us in the wrong direction. It's always this kind of cat and mouse game of back and forth of how that works. In the tactical sense, what we were finding was that human intelligence was extremely valuable, and the skill sets to do counterintelligence were also valuable, but that those skill sets kind of matched one another in some ways. That the actual job and the actual employment of those skills were used in different capacities, but that all in all, the basic skill set was the same. And so what they did was they took the old O251 field, which was the interrogator translator, or the old HUMINT field, and combined it with the old O211 field, and it became a single MOS within the Marine Corps. Our service was just too small. The other services actually still have two different MOSs for that. The Army has 35 Mike and 35 Lima, I think it is. So. And
you actually went to Linguist School, right?
I did. After I did my first 2 deployments out of Camp Lejeune, and then I went down and worked on the headquarters staff at Marfort Res for a couple of years. And then I went up to Monterey and learned Russian up there. It was, I was set for re-enlistment, and I was going to get out. I was done. And of course, the bonus was the thing of the day. If they could suck you in with a bonus, then they could get you. And I was already decided. I was determined I was not going to re-enlist for a bonus. I wasn't going to suck me in. So I was on a trip to headquarters Marine Corps, and we went into where our monitor was, the captain I worked with, and through a different conversation, he says, "Oh, and Gage has something to talk to you about." And he already knew I had nothing to talk about. I did not want to talk to this guy about nothing. And this topic came up, and he said, "So what's it going to take?" He said, "We got bonuses." And I'm like, bonus is not the thing. I do not want, I'm not getting suckered into re-enlisting.
You're not for sale,
just because of bonus. He said, "What about a language?" I said, "What language?" So he had me hooked. It's like he did the thing. He said, "Well, which one do you want?" And I said, "Well, I don't really look Arab in any way. And I don't think it would benefit me, even if I pursue this career outside of the Marine Corps. I don't think it would be beneficial to me to learn Arabic or Chinese for that matter." And so what about Russian? I said, because I think I could probably assimilate with the Russian culture a little bit. Da, конечно. So he said, "All right, Russian it is." And lucky me, I re-enlisted. I did, it was at a time where if you had gotten in on deployments to Afghanistan early, you were good as far as the Marine Corps went. The Army was still, by my estimation, still rotating in and out at that time. You'd have to follow the timeline of kind of how those 2 wars played out. We put a lot of effort into Afghanistan, and we put a lot of effort into Iraq and kind of drew away from Afghanistan for a period of time, and then went back to Afghanistan and tried to clean up what we had messed up. And it's just kind of a mess. But I did kind of want to go to Afghanistan. Hopefully my mom's not on here. I did kind of want to go to Afghanistan because it had felt like I missed it. And I did end up getting the opportunity to go because I went from Monterey, where I learned Russian, down to Camp Pendleton.
Well, you already done 2 Iraq deployments.
I had done 2 Iraq deployments from 2nd over at Lejeune, and then I went down to 1st and in Camp Pendleton. I ended up getting to go to Afghanistan out of there. So, what an incredible team that was! But it was. I would do it all over again, but I'm glad I'm not there. So,
well, let's back up, Gage. So, your first deployment to Iraq, you're a newly minted counterintelligence Marine, right?
Yeah. No idea what I was doing. Yeah.
No idea what you're doing. What was your? But look, before we do that, let's see who's on this morning. John Melly is on up in Boston. Ted is on. Good morning. Mr. Phil Strader, you've graced us with your presence again, sir. He says, an in-person interview, lucky guy. I would do my entire interview in full Rich Brown embrace. Phil, welcome to the farm anytime, brother. We can embrace all you want. Mike is on, says, good morning from Michigan, coin number 1122. Love that location look. Thank you, sir. Nick Wallace, good morning, brother. Nick and I was in the Marine Corps together. God bless you, brother. Coin number 2127. Matt is on. Good morning. Coin number looks like it's 1985. Thank you to the 30 folks that are joining us live. Please like and share. We're going to get into some of the things that Gage did. Spoiler alert, this guy was an interrogator. Probably didn't want to find him in a Connex box asking you questions. It might be a bad day for you. So with that lead in, sir, what did you do in Iraq?
Interrogation.
Hey, there you go.
I was set to I'm not going to tell that whole story because it's other stuff. It's Marine Corps stuff, guy getting in trouble and things like that. But anyways, there was a guy
classified. You want to really?
No, it's not. Okay. It's not that. This is not classified at all. It's a guy got arrested in Virginia Beach while we were in school, and the spot that he was supposed to be in, I ended up taking. I think I was B team pretty much my whole life, so I don't know if I was supposed to even go on that deployment. But anyways, I ended up getting on that deployment. I showed up in Iraq. I had no idea where I was or what I was doing. And they sent me to the detention facility, and I was just sleeping on a rack. And soon enough, the chief of the team came down. He's like, hey, man, are you going to work? Like, I'd been there a couple of days kind of resting up, jet lag and this and that. And I was like, yeah, I thought I was going over to work with this one dude. He's like, no, man, you're working here. And I rarely left that place. We did a few raids out of there, but for the most part, I did solely interrogations the entire deployment. Wow. And logged. I don't know. Somebody would have to challenge me on it, but I logged as many interrogations during that period of time as any Marine that I knew before or since, just because it was a time in Iraq. It was late 2006, and we were rolling dudes up. We would roll 40 dudes up, or they would, and they would bring them to us and just dump them on me. And we had a team of guys, so we worked very hard, but the other guys a lot of times were a little more senior, and so they were sending those guys out. I was the most junior guy on the team, and so if I was doing anything, it was pumping through these interrogations. And so that was I got on the cycle during that deployment of 36 hours up and 12 hours of sleep. Oof. And so I just kept on. I would do interrogations. I would stack 4 or 5 of them up, schedule it with the guard force to stack them up, do some basic level stuff, and then pick out which ones I wanted to go back and talk to later on. But basically I had to talk to every single person that came in. And that's, that kind of makes interrogation a fishy, in that sense. We're more interviewing people at times than interrogating people, but definitely a baptism by fire, because there was no, come on, sit down with this guy and be mentored for a period of time, do a workup with a guy straight out of the schoolhouse, straight on the airplane.
So the speed at which it enabled, because of what Gage was doing and the other guys by interrogating these people, getting that raw intelligence and quickly processing it to get so that the guys could go operational, was that lightning warfare that you heard people talk about during that time, right? Yeah,
for sure. We had taken over all of Western Iraq, the Marines had, and we were really still getting stabilized. We were just on the heels of, I'm not going to be able to think of it, Steel Curtain, which was the push through Al Qaim, which I did on my second deployment, not the Steel Curtain part, but I went to Al Qaim the second deployment. And then all the way down the Euphrates River, we had different battalions all the way down. We had the Rawa Ana area, the Haditha Dam area, the Heat area, which was directly adjacent to Al Assad Air Base. We had, and all the way down into Ramadi, which is kind of where the capital of Western Iraq was. And then we had people all the way out at Ripa, which was going towards the Jordanian border. So we had that whole battle space. So any of those units could be rolling guys up and sending them to the central detention facility. They would keep them for a couple of days, but then they would definitely try to get them up to where we had more resources.
How did Abu Ghraib, the scandal there, how did that affect what you guys were doing? And if you could tell a little bit about Abu Ghraib, for those that don't know.
Yeah. For the Abu Ghraib piece, I would just say Google it, because that's about all I've ever done. I was lat moving at the time. It was news to me, and probably one of the most valuable things that the field taught me was from the day I walked in the door. They said, start studying current events, and I was like, man, I know what's going on in the sports world, or I know what's I know what's going on in my life, but I didn't know current events like what was going on in the world.
Yeah.
We knew that there was a war going on, this and that. So it really tuned me into following what's going on, not just even in American politics, but what's going on in other places.
Yeah.
And so there began this study, but Abu Ghraib was happening around that time. So I did read about it and kind of follow all the pictures and the story. But basically it was a prison in Iraq between Fallujah and Ramadi, on the road between the two. And the guard force there and the interrogators there were doing things that were basically useless, even within the interrogation realm. And I don't know their motivation for doing those things, but basically they had taken a bunch of pictures of themselves doing things to detainees that I can't even fathom, as far as like piling them up naked and things like this. I mean, like I said, it's easier to Google it to get that part of the story, because I don't know the details to that level, but I do know that what came out of that was Senator John McCain, who had been a POW during Vietnam, led this charge to rewrite the interrogation manual. And part of his campaign to rewrite the interrogation manual was to make it unclassified, that there were no classified things that we could do to a detainee, that everything was above board. And in addition to that, so you didn't have any classified portion. It was all unclassified. The setting was very, it wasn't a strict setting, but you just weren't allowed to really manipulate the setting as you could before. I mean, as far as like even, taking guys for a walk, which, there was a book, The Interrogator, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, documented a German interrogator during World War II. And it was it was a great read. It was kind of the basic reading, for interrogations at the time. And so anyways, there was this book, and there were a lot of great things that he had done that were not, it's not the TV version. You're not, pulling fingernails, or you're not, what the big thing for us was, you can't use stress positions. Well, to this day, I don't even know what a stress position is, because they said don't do it.
Yeah.
But they never showed us what they were in order to do them. And by the way, maybe that's a good idea with my kids. Like, instead of not telling them to do stuff, just stop showing them stuff they shouldn't do by me doing it. But anyways, the process became very, very vanilla. And so it solely depended on your ability to connect with somebody, another human being, on a personal level, build rapport, and truly like connect with them to where they were willing to tell you things that, I always think of it in context of some opposing force comes into America and starts asking us a bunch of questions. And you think to yourself, there's no way I ain't talking to not one, think of the major countries that even have that capability potentially.
Yeah.
And there's no way I'd talk to anybody, but I bet that guy would. I know he's the weak link. And that's the same thing that we do. We go in, we find the weak link, and that's who we talk to and get information from. But still there's that barrier that, my size or my language
Mm-hmm.
leads to that could still prevent someone. And so there's still a method of getting to know someone, building rapport with someone, and finding a way in to let them open up to you and talk to you about what's going on in their area. And the majority of it was out of fear. It was who was worse. Was it worse to talk to the Americans, or was it worse to go back and tell the insurgents that were living in your village that you had talked to the Americans?
Yeah.
So it was a challenging time. But as far as the actual, the administrative side of it, it became even. It's hard for me to say because I came in after they had rewritten the manual, and that's what I was going to say earlier when I said what made it worse. It's all unclassified. You can go Google the DoD interrogation manual to this day, and it's online, which means if I can Google it, guess who else can Google it?
Yeah. Well, if you joined us last week, we talked to Dr. John Cronin, who was a Force Reconnaissance Marine in Vietnam, and then went to Rhodesia during the Bush War and was a member of the Selous Scouts. So he was a bearded operator fighting African guerrillas. And one of the things that he said, Gage, was when they would capture an insurgent, Zanla, Zipra, and guerrilla, they would bring them back to their fort, and they had Special Branch who was there to interrogate them. And it'd be a white guy and a black guy. And they'd sit down and go, hey, the war's over for you. You have two options, very simple. And again, like he said, they didn't give them water. They didn't give them food. They didn't give them a second to rest. You have two options. First one is swing. We're going to hang you right here in this fort. And they were serious. They didn't play around. Or you're going to talk to us. So again, their version of interrogation, pretty crude, but incredibly effective. So I would imagine you didn't give them those kind of options.
I mean, look, I don't know where those, the media talks about black sites and the CIA and these things. And I don't know where those are. For us, it was simply talk to the guy. And, we talked about this a little bit. But I had the option to withhold water, but I had to give them water if they asked for it. So that was about the extent of anything I could control. Everything else, it was in a shipping container. We had 4 or 5 of them set up so we could do multiple interrogations by multiple guys at a time. And very straightforward, just sit down with another dude. What became the most valuable piece or the most valuable tool was the linguist. All of our linguists had to be able to get a clearance, which meant most of them were a little bit older guys who were U.S. citizens in general. Typically, they had left Iraq in the early 80s or mid 80s and come to America. A lot of Dearborn, Michigan guys, a few from other places who had moved away from Dearborn. But those guys were incredible. And those were the first line of guys that I had to get in with, that I had to build relationships with. And I took pride in taking the more difficult linguist cases, and it was one of those things where guys would, I don't know why it became this thing to like kind of badmouth the linguist. Oh, they're not saying what I'm saying. Or I always just thought, man, like your basic skill is to get another person to do something that they don't want to do.
Right.
And you can't even get with the that with the linguist. Like, I don't know how great of an interrogator or great of a CIA human guy you are if you can't even get the linguist to follow you. But anyways, I really enjoyed those relationships. I still, to this day, one of my linguists for my second deployment, I met up with him probably 2 years ago in Miami. He lives down that way. He's a former sheriff's deputy in Broward County.
Oh, cool.
And I got to meet up with him again. we had one guy on the first deployment. His name, we called him John the Bastard. And John, I think John had 2 teeth in the front of his mouth and smoked like a freight train. But John and I developed this great working relationship, and it was like butter, man. We could go in and we could just work a guy. And once in a while, John would say, "Can I talk to him? Please, can I talk to him?" And I was like, what is this thing? So, after a while, I was like, John, what is it you want to talk to this guy about? Because it's like, no, you can't just go off on your own,
right?
And just talk to these guys, because that was part of it. Like they could only say what you were saying. They could only repeat what they were saying. So the linguist was not part of the act, if you will.
Yeah.
But what I learned to appreciate about John was he said, look, man, like some of these guys, when you go in to talk to them, they just don't get what's going on. They don't get the scenario they're in. They don't get who you are. And not as the interrogator, you can tell them you're just the guy, or, whatever you want to tell them you are, because part of it at times is leaving some obscurity as to what things you can make available to them, or what, how it is that you want to present yourself. Essentially, you can't be medical.
Yeah.
And you can't be religious. It was basically a couple of the written guidelines, the policy guidelines. But John was like, I just want to talk to the guy and tell him, look, this guy's here to help you. Yeah. Like, we came all the way. He left his family and his everything to come here and try to help this country. And here you are trying to screw it up.
Yeah. So
just talk to the guy. Just tell him, like, you don't have to tell him anything bad about yourself. Just talk to him about other bad guys and things like this, which was, this was something that John and I kind of on the side worked out along the way. Was when he would give me that cue, he was like, can I talk to him? I was like, tell him the thing, John. Mm-hmm. Tell him the thing. And John had this low, like growly voice, and imagine like the little bit of lisp with literally 2 teeth, I think it was. And he would just, and he was an old physics professor from Fallujah, the university in Fallujah, and so he would very properly, like, kid, let me tell you something. And that was my favorite part, was he was like, let me talk to you, my friend. And then he would tell him the thing. And we started, that was when I started learning, when I was there, and I got there and I was still trying to figure out, like, okay, so I know the textbook version of just asking this guy questions down the line. I can ask him what his name is and where he's from. And basically you get to this point where you have to actually start conducting an interrogation. They actually have to start, working on building a relationship with the guy and what approaches you might use to gain additional information from him. And that became the success, was getting in with the linguist. And so by the time I came back the second deployment, the linguist, it was a little bit harder to work with, because he was a little more strong-headed.
Yeah.
And I was we were the best ones, man. We were like, he was like dad, and I was like son. He was a little bit older, so it was like
Batman and Robin.
Yeah, we could go out and get it done, man. It was awesome.
So we've had Dr. T.C. Fuller on here before, retired FBI agent who did interrogations as well, I think in Afghanistan. Let's see. Giles on Mike says, it looks cool. Thank you, sir. Giles says, looks like a man cave. Yeah. Dan is on. I can't pronounce your last name. Dan says, what can you promise? Amnesty, citizenship, etc.
I mean, that was, as Marines, we really, really prided ourselves on determining what motivated a guy to give you information by not using promises or anything. We were and this applies to the other side of human intelligence, which was talking to locals. We made it through what seemed to be the entire war without really having to pay a lot of guys. You could pay for information. That was, infantry units would roll out and talk to the locals and give them money for information. That wasn't like some specialized human intelligence thing. We did think that we had a better handle on the questions we were asking and what the intent of those questions and how to get more detail. But there were certainly some skilled, like young Marines just out there on a patrol who maybe had law enforcement experience or something like that, who could question locals. And you had, you know, I don't know who carried the money for the unit, but they could pay somebody.
Yeah.
On the interrogation side, it wasn't much use in paying somebody or promising somebody any money, but excuse me, the there was never a level of interrogation that we were conducting at the tactical level, just in Western Iraq, a bunch of, you know, there were some very few, I would say, middle class Iraqis that I dealt with. Most of them were lower class, you know, what we refer to often as dirt farmers. And so you're just trying to get this information a lot of times out of people that couldn't even write and read. So they didn't really ask for those things to answer the question, Dan, and I appreciate it because I think that, and that's something I want to be sure that I point out, like, I wasn't some high-speed operator, man. I was just like the Marine Corps, you know, as far as these skill sets, even though I had the basic skills to do a lot of things at a different level, this was really, you know, if I made the comment a while ago, B team type stuff. Like, it was simply the tactical level. What information can I get out of this dude that's actionable? And I burned through so many dudes that were just dudes, man. They were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. They rolled up an entire mosque one day.
Oh boy.
Of just everybody that was there. And I'm like, well, what do you want me to ask this guy? Because as far as I know, he was praying in a mosque and we rolled him up. Well, the shots came from the mosque. Figure out which one it is. And I'm like, I'm not asking these guys. I'm not asking 40 guys which one shot.
Yeah.
Because, again, put yourself on the other side of that. You're at church.
Yeah.
Opposing force from whatever country you think can do it rolls in here and takes everybody from church on Sunday morning and starts asking questions. Which one of you is going to turn? None of the people I went to church with growing up.
Not in my Baptist church.
So you start to think about, like, the common sense side of what is it you can ask these people. And so that too was a lesson learned for me, like hitting the ground, like running, you know, mock speed, trying to catch up to what it is I was supposed to be extracting out of these guys at the time. And, you know, it's like I said, it seems way more high speed than it actually is at times. You became the professional question asker, not the interrogator from a sense of like a movie or a book or anything like that. You just, you know, it was your job to ask the questions. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe somebody wants to come back and challenge me on that. But
well, one of the questions that came in, and let's get to some of these questions real quick. Ted asked a really good question. Ruben says, Rich Brown must carry around Band-Aids looking that sharp. Thank you, Ruben. That coming from a handsome man as you, I appreciate that. I've got to up the game a little bit having the Gage here with us this morning. But one of the questions that I believe Ted asked was, did any of the people that you interrogate, do you think any of them were trained in how to counter what you were doing?
There were stories that during some site exploitation that they had found that open source interrogation manual. There were some guys that I spoke to, especially on the first time around that lengthy interrogation deployment, where the tactics that they employed, you could tell they had been taught something. That they were taught how to actually use counterinterrogation techniques. I'm not sure that it went to that level, but they definitely have been told by somebody, this is how you act. This is how you keep from answering questions. There was one kid that we were just, so a scenario where some kids were shooting out the trunk of a car. The taillight had been taken out and they were shooting with a rifle taking pop shots at Marines. And they gave chase to these guys and they found a rifle that had been taken from a sniper team that had been killed in the middle of the night. And so they traced the serial number back to this sniper team. So they knew they had an M16A2 that had belonged to a service member previously. So obviously the line of questioning that everyone outside of my world wants to know is, was this kid involved with that situation? And how did he get this weapon? And the kid, It was the most frustrating thing, dude. You go in and you start asking questions. He's like, I didn't have a rifle. I wasn't in a car. That's not my, like, I don't live here. Like, it was everything you would ask questions like, no, bro, you were carrying the rifle. You dropped the rifle. We took, I didn't have a rifle. I was like, man, that is so frustrating. But the way that he did it seemed like a train, like he had been taught. And he was young. He was probably 15, 16 years old. And if he had the street march, just the raw street smarts to act like that, then good on him. But it was, I talked to you last night about validation. Like sometimes you get into something, you just jump feet first into it. The Marine Corps, protective services, everything I've done in life, I've just kind of like, all right, here we go, and jump in. And even the lat move from the just joining the Marine Corps into the intelligence world. And it's like, am I doing this right? Like, I don't even know. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Nothing's really, I'm getting information, but nothing's, I don't know. And so I ran all the approaches, man. I worked this kid and just, elevated it properly and brought it back down and, used different types of things. Read about the approaches. You can, I probably ran all of them. Chapter 8, the interrogation manual, go look it up. But anyways, I worked this kid. And by the time you're done, he's still on. I didn't have a rifle. I'm like, no, we're not discussing that aspect of it. You had the rifle. Tell me where you got the rifle, kind of thing. And much more crafty, but that was the basic. And I was like, man, I can't. I went in and we had a gunny that was our team chief. He had done the invasion. He had been in the field before that. And I was like, Gunny, I can't get this guy, man. I don't even know. Like, I've just, for the first time, and it was later on in the deployment, so I was already like in the groove. Yeah. I was like, for the first time, I just feel like I'm against a brick wall and I can't figure it out. And so this respected kind of mentor goes in, and I sat in because I'm like, I got to know what it is that he does, because it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Everybody, has this skill set, and it's going to work every time. And I think that's probably what I appreciate more, is learning where the failures are. But anyways, he went in, and if I had a recording of my version and his version, they mirrored each other. It was perfect. And he got to the same point. He was just like, I don't know what this kid is. But it was obvious that he had been taught some sort of resistance. Yeah. Now, to what level and what they were using to provide that resistance, I'm not sure. But man, that was a tough one, but it was validating in the sense that, the skill set, because I went from the schoolhouse to the deployment. Like, any other job, you're like, you kind of dip your feet in the water and you get tagged along, brought along, or, field training officer, something like that in different aspects. This was, here's the notebook, man. Go and start asking questions and getting answers.
So that was, did you interrogate both Iraq deployments?
Yeah, I was, because of my experience on the first one, because I'd done so many interrogations, interview plus, if you even want to call it that, because some diehard interrogators, and I respect this too, the art of interrogation takes time. If you really want to get into a guy, especially one that wants to provide some resistance, it takes time. And I mean literal, like, you got to develop a relationship with somebody. And a lot of times you have to be crafty about how you do that. Bring them lunch or something. I don't know. Like, if I'm going to impress you, bring you lunch. Literally, Rich. I brought him lunch. I don't know. So we were, to use the term interrogation, I understood that I wasn't going full on interrogator in the sense of we didn't have the time. We only had 7 days from the time they were dropped until we had to either make the decision to send them forward to Buka or whatever the larger detention sites were, or send them back home. And so it was a ton of catch and release. But I had to determine between catch and release, if we needed to keep the guy. I know of one specific occurrence where we probably released a guy that shouldn't have been released, but we just couldn't figure out what to keep him on.
Yeah.
We definitely forwarded a lot of bad guys and definitely released a lot of good guys. And those were my favorite guys to actually talk to, because that became less of an interrogation and more of a source meeting. You could just talk to the guy about what's the baseline. You talked about baseline a couple of weeks ago. What's the baseline for your village? And I can forward this information. You always think about finding a target. You always think of it in terms of you're doing intelligence to find targets so that we can send out the helos or the trucks or whatever and hit a target. That wasn't always the case. Sometimes you just needed general information about what's the baseline here, what's normal, or even how has the baseline shifted or changed. Has a group of insurgents moved into the north side of the village and they're not really doing anything yet, but we know they're there. Is anybody going to tell you that?
Yeah. And
you can find the good guys that will tell you stuff like that if you can get them to believe that you're not really trying to detain them for a lengthy period. No, man, I'm sending you home. Just help me out here. And so maybe if you talk about asylum, maybe that was probably the biggest advantage that I did have was as I sat there, I knew how my recommendation could play out. I knew whether I could send a guy home or send him to higher detention and at least make his stay longer.
Alan Kelly is a retired state trooper, and he asked the question, was it just you and your interpreter, or could you bring in another interrogator to do kind of good cop, bad cop?
So, what do we call that? Good cop, bad cop was, it's in the interrogation manual. I think it's identified as Mutt and Jeff, but it was something where we didn't have enough experience employing it to where, a lot of us thought it would be a great idea. If we used something like that, it was easier for one of us to go in and maybe get all the basic information and get a baseline on the guy, and then identify who we thought on the team was a good match for trying to interrogate the guy. Something we talked about, I guess we talked about it last night, was, a major difference, and coming from a law enforcement background, I wanted to mention this, is there was this theme, and it was worse in Afghanistan than it was, 7 years later in Afghanistan in 2014 than it was ever in the Iraq deployments. But there was always this theme in Afghanistan about, is he guilty or not? And I think that the good cop, bad cop is geared towards gaining some type of confession or getting the guy to, rat out his buddies or something like that. And if you drew the process of intelligence down to just gaining information, which was my, when I talked early on about all these different intelligence disciplines, if you take pictures from space or you take pictures from a drone overhead or anything like that, that's simply information that feeds into the intelligence cycle that processes. The information is processed and becomes intelligence.
Yes.
So when you say I was getting intelligence from somebody, I was getting information from somebody. And whatever I could make of that information, however I could frame that information, became a part of the cycle that was turned into intelligence. So that's a very distinct, in my opinion, something that gets missed a lot of times. You ask a guy a question, and all of a sudden you have, this happens with COVID a lot. Some numbers come out. It's like the analysis says. No, the numbers say. The analysis is what are all the other factors that lead into why it is that we have an outbreak in a more dense city, or we have an outbreak in a city where the social vulnerability index is actually very high. Yeah. That's analysis. Analysis is not just observing or gaining information, or intelligence is not just gaining the information. You've got to cycle that through other pieces of what's going on in the area. And so anyways, I draw that back to my purpose in a military setting in a foreign country where we're rolling through, or in this case, fairly static, but it's simply to gain information. An intelligence interrogation is to gain information, not a confession. a law enforcement. And so what we did to somewhat answer this question, not directly, but we actually had CID guys that would come down and try to get confessions out of these guys.
CID.
Yeah.
Explain what that is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Criminal investigators, basically. They were, at least on the Marine Corps side, they were military police officers who had been trained as investigators. I'm not exactly familiar with their training or whatever, what have you, but that's who they are at its basic. So when we provided resistance to, I don't care whether the guy's guilty or not. And actually in the culture, both in Iraq and in Afghanistan, the guy wasn't going to tell on himself. Very, very rarely did you get a guy to break to the level. I talked about that in respect to Afghanistan last night, as far as what breaking was. You could get a guy to give you all sorts of information, though. And that was my purpose. My purpose was never to gain a confession or guilt or not guilt or telling his buddies so much as it was, if his buddies were bad, sure, tell me about them. But the basic was I didn't care whether the guy was guilty or not. And so Mutt and Jeff, a lot of times, our good cop, bad cop was geared towards telling me if a guy's guilty or not. And so it's more of just gaining as much information as I possibly can out of this dude. And that's where the relationship became important. I could build an adversarial relationship, or I could build a friendly relationship with a guy, depending on how the conversation was going, in order to just get as much info as I could.
And one of the things that Gage and I talked about last night, we had bourbon with Rich last night, our coffee with Rich. One of the things we talked about was understanding your own personal bias going into the thing, and then trying to understand, like, how is that shaping what you're doing and maybe what you're writing. You interrogate this guy, and like you said, Gage, I'm not getting intelligence, I'm getting information. So I have to be careful with how I craft that information, because you don't want to prejudice the outcome of what the intel analyst will do with that information. Is that correct?
Yeah, precisely. The job of the intel analyst was to take all the information available and to provide intelligence to the commander so that the commander can make decisions from the intelligence. Now, he would reference sometimes our reports, and that's fine, but it was very intentional that we passed along with that kind of a disclaimer to say, this is not processed information. This is just the raw information. But yeah, by the time I got to Afghanistan, I was in a more leadership position, and the team 3 guys that we deployed with were amazing practitioners. I don't know, I had some really, really great guys, and especially great leadership on my first 2 deployments, but we were all young, man. We were cycling in and out as quickly as could possibly happen. And the same thing was happening with infantry units in general. Like, they were just on a rotation. You had guys that were running 4 and 5 rotations of deployments during that period of 3 or 4 years. And so the same was for us. As quickly as they could get us into the field, we were deploying and we were hitting the ground super green. But by the time I got to Afghanistan, I had quite a bit of experience, and that was something I shared with those guys was, look, go out here and talk to these guys, but the most important thing you're going to do is present the information to the intelligence world. And the way that you present that information, you can make it, this dirt farmer can be the worst Taliban guy you've ever seen, or he can be the nicest, most helpful guy you've ever seen, simply on how you write the report at the end of all of it.
Yeah. And
if you've written reports, you can embellish things, or you can, I would never suggest that somebody does. I'm just saying, like, I think if you've been in the law enforcement world or something like that, the pitfalls, even fitness report writing, it's something as simple as that. We used to call them velvet daggers.
That's right.
To where you can really get it to a guy of he's an all right guy. Yeah. What does all right mean? Yeah. But yeah, these guys were definitely. I wanted to address. I saw the word torture in there, and a reference to it being not valuable. And I couldn't agree more wholeheartedly. We'd have to scroll up to see the actual comment, but the concept of torture, it's helpful. I think the gentleman you talked to last week, I think in that scenario, maybe it helped those guys, given that exact what they were doing and how successful. as far as the process of an interrogation, as far as the limitations that were on us at the time, I don't know that any torturous act would have been helpful whatsoever. Because in my opinion, after having done it, 400 times, I think it leads you down the road of gaining information that someone will tell you just to make you happy.
Oh yeah.
And I think that that's very dangerous,
Yeah.
especially when we're taking action.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times in a short turnaround on this potential information. You're gaining information that you're giving to, your guys who can go out and act on it. And if it's inaccurate, especially nowadays, there's a much lower appetite for mistakes.
Yeah.
If you roll into a village and you start shooting people and there was nothing bad going on, it's not the information that was gathered beforehand. It's what you found once you got there that becomes the how you're convicted, basically.
Yeah. So let's get into, if you have questions for Gage, throw them in there. Thank you to the 30 folks that are joining us live. Please like and share, because we're going to move into, you did an Afghan deployment. You get out, you and I link up in the Red Cross. And then, see, what does Gilly says? Was there a time the subject would never break despite you guys? Guilty and knew something. Yeah, I think we kind of touched on that. Could you talk through the Afghan deployment? I've got an Irish wolfhound that's trying to break into the pub. I'm going to take care of her real quick. Mary the wolfhound. Can you tell me about Afghan?
Real quick? Cousin Stephanie's on here, and she asked a question about one of my favorites, and I wanted to, I can tell a bit of a story about that as best I can. We had a guy who we had found out was plotting to harm someone on the Afghanistan side of the base. So in Afghanistan, our base was joined up next to both the British base and the Afghanistan base of the Afghan National Army. And we had found out that that one of the Afghan National Army guys, privates somewhere along in there, that he was plotting to harm one of the leadership on the base. And this was while he was away on leave and he was set to come back. And so as he came back, we arrested him. Well, the Afghan said, I don't know how you got this information, and I don't know what the information actually is. So how are we supposed to talk to the guy? So they came to the Americans and said, will you guys interrogate him and let us basically listen in? And so we obliged. Basically, you missed it, but there was an Afghan army guy. He was going to harm one of the headquarters people on the Afghan side of the base there in Afghanistan. We were next door to one another. So they came to us and said, will you guys interrogate him? Because we don't know how you got the information or what the information is. Basically, you just told us he was going to hurt one of our guys. Right. And while we believe you, understandably, for both us and them, we don't know what to ask the guy. Mm-hmm. So they asked, would you guys interrogate him? And so I was selected to interrogate the guy. And man, it was one of the funnest, because I had a lot of experience at the time and really could employ in detail. I had a lot of time on my hands to talk to the guy. And for 3 days, for 8 hours a day, we talked to the guy and got solid information throughout the entire time. I mean, we had to work for it a little bit day one, but by day 2 and day 3, I think he understood his plight, and it was really a successful, full-fledged, like, schoolhouse version. I'd come full circle almost from what I've been taught going into the first deployment, which didn't turn out anything like the scenarios I'd been taught. Finally, I got to, for the first time, just really spend all the time I needed to get into this guy, and really opened up a couple little things with him that even the Afghanis I thought were impressed with me. I don't know, maybe not.
Hey, if you're just joining us this morning, somebody shared it. You're like, who are these guys? My name is Rich Brown. I'm the co-host and co-founder of the American Warrior Society and the American Warrior Show. Thank you to the 30 folks that are joining us live. I'm joined this morning by my good friend Gage Cobb, a former counterintelligence and human intelligence Marine, who then transitioned out after 13 years on active duty. And we worked together at the Red Cross about 6 years or so ago. And then Gage went into something else, and maybe it's a good time to talk about that. And please like and share. I see Gordon has joined us. Good morning, Gordon. Glad to have you, sir. Coin number 1688 up in Ohio. If you want to know what a coin number is, please check out AmericanWarriorSociety.com and find out if our self-defense community is the right place for you.
Yeah, I do want to come back and touch on a little bit later, because interrogations is not all I did on even the Marine Corps side. And a lot of actually the other side of what I did, as far as, meeting locals and protecting that relationship, is what served as the basis for what I do in protective services now. A lot of guys, after I left the Marine Corps and got involved in protective services, I became, what's colloquially known as a bodyguard. Others want to call it executive protection, but I don't really, in my sense, I think Todd Fox would agree with me. I offer protective. Most notably, I worked for Jennifer Lopez for about 3 years. And she was a phenomenal person to work for, but that's where I got my feet wet, and boy, did they get soaking wet. That was something that I had a relationship with a guy when I was a Marine. I was kind of serving as a mentor to younger guys who were just coming in, that OJT process before you went to the schoolhouse. I really enjoy going down there and teaching guys and talking to guys about, look, there are some basic tools in your tool to put in your toolkit before you go and you try to learn. And we can broach a couple of those topics later on, but basically I wanted to introduce the concept that I used those skill sets, I think, very successfully on the protective services side. Whereas I did have the security guard background, I did have the infantry background. So I was we did a ton of shooting, a ton of, CQB style training and tactics early on, because it was very popular around the early 2000s to get into CQB. And I know you had one of the gentlemen on who likely served, I think, just a bit after me, up in the same area with the recapture tactics team up there. And so we had done a lot of that training. I had, on the Marine Corps side, I had done the Marine Corps martial arts program and became an instructor within that program. I had gone and trained as a non-lethal weapons instructor. So I had some tools. And then, you take either somebody with a typically a military background or law enforcement background are perceived as the best guys to kind of transition into the protective services world. However, whatever route they choose, kind of sub routes, I guess, within that world. For me personally, I just got a call one day and this buddy who I'd kind of mentored to some degree, his brother was actually dating Jennifer at the time. And so just purely by happenstance, it wasn't even me, technically, they called, to be perfectly honest. So this is a bit of a confession, but they didn't call me. They didn't even care who I was. A friend of mine who they did called me. And so I went out to California kind of on a trial basis. But the trial was I had quit my job on a Friday and I bought a one-way ticket. So as far as I was concerned, it wasn't a trial at all. It was, my family depends on my success here.
Yeah.
In retrospect, so advance far past day one. Day one's a funny story. I'll tell it, but
yeah, please.
Advance far past day one, and in retrospect, I never should have been offered the job. That I was naive to take the job, and they were dumb to hire me. Luckily, I was in a position where there was another guy there at the time, and I worked a lot as a singleton for about the last, especially couple of years that I was there. Luckily, for the first about year, I had a great guy that I worked with, and he shared the responsibility primarily with Jennifer, and I worked a lot with the kids and built a strong relationship with the camp. And then when he transitioned out, I stepped into his role, and that's when the lights really came on. The funniest part of that aspect of it for me is you can take a look at the same places, and I'm familiar with the timeline, so I know there's some less than flattering paparazzi photos out there.
Speaking of which,
me.
after this show, Google Jennifer Lopez bodyguard, and you'll see hundreds or thousands of pictures of Gage.
Hopefully less and less nowadays because of the unflattering ones. But I can see an evolution of how I did the job, and I appreciated a couple of Todd's comments a couple of weeks ago, because he alluded to this. He didn't say it directly, but alluded to, like, man, you can get into some situations where you completely aren't, prepared for that level of what's going on. Like, I think that a lot of guys could easily transition out of the military or out of law enforcement into protective services. There's a level working with Jay-Z and Beyonce, working with Madonna and Guy Ritchie, working with Jennifer and Alex, is what I dealt with the majority of the time, where, bro, that's just a different level. That's a completely different mindset. Every person in the world recognized, especially at the time, recognized Jennifer because she was on 4 television shows and a movie and was putting out music. And it was one of the hotter times, as far as, heat state of how popular she was or how recognizable she was at the time. She was on commercials. And when you can see somebody's face and then look at them on the street and they look back practically the same, that was another one of her kind of trademark things, is you can see her on the street. She looks just like she does. It's not fake. Like she really looks like that. We could be driving 35 miles an hour up the street in New York City, and somebody on a street corner would inevitably yell, "Hey, J-Lo!" It was like, how did you even see, like, looking through a car window, how did you even see that? Yeah. But it was just something about her face or her bone structure or something. I don't know what it is, but you could really, really recognize her. And so that led to everywhere you went. We could walk a half a block from her apartment to the gym in New York City, and people would recognize her and people want a selfie with her. The selfie is the bane of my existence, but whatever.
And I would imagine that, someone like her, that's an A-list actress, A-list singer, she doesn't want you to just stiff arm everybody that walks up on her, right? She probably wants to be engaging, and I'm sure that made your life difficult.
Yeah. So obviously the best stories I can tell are for me and are a bit self-deprecating, but there was a night, I didn't tell you this. There was a night we were coming back to the apartment in New York, turned on the street where she lived on, and I could see there was a restaurant adjacent to her front door. It was like door, and you had to know what was behind door number 2 to understand exactly what was going on. But the restaurant, sometimes the smokers would step out of the restaurant and stand in front of our doorway. Mm-hmm. So in order to just walk over there and pretend like I was going in the door to kind of part the sea, I got out of the car and started to walk over there. And my buddy, the driver, Jeff, told me after I got out of the car, he said, and then she said, "There goes Gage to yell at somebody again." And first of all, I didn't even know that I was perceived as yelling at people. I thought I was pretty calm and relaxed. Maybe she perceived it in a different way. And she was always super kind to me. So she never meant that in the way that, but he thought it was hilarious because he knew that I wasn't going over there to yell or to even, it was just, it's funny the way it comes out. And it's kind of, for me, it was like, man, I got to figure out what I'm doing wrong here. Cause you're always in that evaluation of the validation of how, nobody really gives you a performance evaluation in that job. It's all either you got the job today or you don't have the job tomorrow. And that's I'm sure some of the folks that you've had on from the EP world can relate to that. Like, some days there is no explanation. Some days it's just whatever the perception was is your demise. But
this is Gage, were you allowed to carry a firearm as a bodyguard?
So I'm going to give the exact same answer that Todd gave on that. It depended on where you are. I have a lot more flexibility nowadays because I work with a client out of Nashville, and I don't have any special privileges or anything else. So if you download the CCW app or whatever you use for your resource to tell you where you can carry and where you can't, and try your best to keep up with that, the legalities of it. That's how I practice. I carry a CC to a couple of different states as far as their concealed carry permit that allows me to carry in about 35, close to 40 states. And past that, I have, anybody in the industry can pretty well tell you, it's unless you're a resident of Los Angeles County and have a really compelling reason, you're not getting one in Los Angeles County. Ventura County or Orange County potentially, and I'm only familiar really with those counties immediately surrounding Los Angeles. But I don't know anybody in California. I know some guys who've gotten one, but they have to be a resident there as the basic starter kit. I don't know anybody in New York that gets it, the privilege to carry. And so just like Todd's answer, I'm going to say, if you need a gun, you hire a gun. And I'm going to go one step further than I think he did, not but just because the way he framed his answer, but you alluded to this during that conversation of if my job as a protector is standing and getting in a gunfight, then I think I've failed by that point. And that's why I say if I need a gun, I hire a gun, because that becomes that person's job. My job still is directed solely at the people I'm protecting. Now, I've been in a ton of scenarios where you could make the case that it would be beneficial. And I do carry quite often when I'm with the client that I work for now. But we still tour and we still go to places like New Jersey and New York where, having the permits that I do, you cannot carry. What I do, oftentimes is still bring one along and use the transportation laws to keep one until I get into a place where I can carry. But you just can't always carry one. And then there's the overseas conversation. The exact same answer. If I need a gun, I hire one, especially overseas. That's the standard answer because I've never sought out.
Yeah. One of the things that the idea of I need this thing to feel like I'm armed, I think is a bit of a, and I don't want to get too esoteric here, but there's a whole lot of ways you can be armed. And Todd and I talked about this, and of course I throw it to you. Just because I take a weapon away from Gage is not unarmed.
Yeah.
You've got all the years that you deployed as a Marine, all the training that you've been to, your Marine Corps martial arts program instructorship, your less lethal instructor. You've got all this, and then you layer some infrastructure around you, like hiring a gun, knowing the driver, knowing the routes, doing the pre-planning, doing all that kind of work. You're armed with that. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess that kind of reaches back to the part of what I said when we entered this portion of my life is a lot of the skill sets that I use in the protective services world don't come from some, the more skill sets that I use don't come from what happens when bad things happen scenario. The day-to-day routine life, all of those skill sets are even more valuable because it's the things that you encounter every single day, every single moment. And that is the preparation that goes into it. Yeah. On the intelligence side of things, that experience was built around, I'm going to have a meeting with someone in a foreign country, and I have to protect that relationship. Mm-hmm. And everything that goes into protecting the relationship of a meeting with someone overseas, he's likely betraying his family, his country, something in order to provide me information. You have to protect him, and especially if he's a good source of information, you don't want to lose that. And that has happened to me. Not directly associated with me, but it has happened that I've lost an individual who I had a good relationship with over there in Iraq in particular. And it sucks, man. It's the most gut-wrenching thing. Like, did I do something that jeopardized his life and now his kids don't have a dad?
Yeah.
Based on our relationship. And in that case, I think it was his prior relationships he was within the insurgency and got out and became a police officer, Iraqi police officer. But anyways, I digress. So it was those skill sets about, you think about it and you talk about it, but where are the exits when you walk into a restaurant? That's the most common, like, I'm going to just throw this one out there to say that I have situational awareness.
Yeah.
But we talked about it a little bit last night. Like if I'm walking down the street with, you can find there's a pretty good picture of me with one of the kids on my shoulders and shorts and flip flops. Actually, that was completely. Look, you get in those situations, and believe me, if you see me with flip flops on with a client, it's because there were so many things that happened before that. Like, given a different scenario, I would have had tennis shoes on and all these things, but the situation dictated that I showed up like that in that particular moment. But again, you prepare yourself to see everything that's going on as best you can. And in that case, it's an open air mall, and you're looking at group of guys. How are they dressed? What's their general demeanor? How are they approaching one another? Where is their attention focused?
Mm-hmm.
I used to be able to pick out people taking photos from across the room, not only because the flash of their stinking cell phone, but you could also just tell the attention they paid from the moment you stepped in the room until they thought they sneaky got their picture in. And you can see it, but you have to be paying attention. And that's the skill set that I'm most translated to the protective services world, was protecting a relationship. And that those skill sets translated directly to how I became a practitioner as a within the protective services world. So I feel like my skill sets, in hand to hand and in shooting and things like that, are good, valuable assets. But let's face it, if I never shoot a single shot doing this job, that will be the most wasted of all my assets if that's all I focus my time on.
Yeah.
And the same thing with, you have a high enough profile client, you're gonna move people in a crowd. And that aspect, you talked about with Todd. Again, I hate to keep referencing Todd. There have been plenty of great resources that you've had, but you talk about just moving people, standing upright, working yourself through a crowd. If you want to see a good video, go and look up J-Lo in Capri. We were there a couple years ago, and it's a YouTube video. You can find several different versions of it, but basically there's one where we're moving through a sea of people in Capri.
Where's Capri at?
Capri is off the coast of the Amalfi Coast in Italy, and we were just venturing out that way. It was vacation, and in Capri there is no driver. There is no, you get your own private service like sometimes we grow accustomed to, or even get in the cycle of expectation. You get off the shuttle in Capri and you get into one of these like sketchy taxi cab things that takes you to the top of the hill where all the shops are. I have no idea, man. I've never been to Capri. Like, no, my little redneck rear end has never been to Capri. I'm sorry. And by the way, on my own, I may not ever would ever go, but I'm happy I had this experience because now I know, now I understand, and now I can prepare properly for another. And of course, before that ever happened, I did have a heads up and I was able to go and kind of do some advanced work and check it out beforehand. But this was the way that it had to be arranged. You had to rely on some guy that you didn't know to drive you to the top. And once you got dropped off, there was about a 50-yard walk into the shops and you were just in it. There's no cars. There's no, when you talk about trying to get out of a space, you're walking out. So if you walk in, you're walking out. There's no rescue. There's no extract. There's nothing. But of course it's high-end shops.
Oh yeah.
However, go watch the video for yourself if you're that interested, but it's a sea of people, and you want to talk about uncomfortable. From my standpoint, first of all, you ask for extra people, and much like was alluded to in your previous conversation, a lot of times you're just frankly told no.
Yeah.
We're not paying for it, and we don't want the extra appearance of, a bunch of guys walking around with us, just because we don't want to give off that I don't know, whatever it is, PR side of it.
Well, let's talk about that a minute because there's some interesting psychology to this thing. You know, if you do have a big bubble of people, people are probably more likely to press on you. If you go out completely up armored, everybody's got riot gear on, they're more likely to throw a brick at you than a soft cover, a soft hat, baseball type hat. So it's weird how humans are like this. Like, for example, people like, are we getting close to a civil war? Because look what's going on with Antifa and this and that. But I think there's a lot of LARPing going on, live action role playing, because if these people really wanted to come armed and hurt and kill police officers, they could do it. We're in America, folks. They can get those firearms, but they're not. They're coming out armed with leaf blowers so they can push the CS back on the cops and laser pointers and all these kind of soft things. So to the point, maybe there is some value in a lower profile appearance sometimes. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. Even on that trip, there were a couple times where Jennifer and I broke away from the others because she even recognized that, and she said aloud, Gage and I can get there easier.
Mm-hmm.
And so she understood the value of the lesser, the entourage, even not just protective guys, but you have an assistant and you have, a friend and you have another version of an assistant and you have whoever else, along with you. And what is, a single person making a decision to go shopping turns into a group of 10 people trying to walk through this massive crowd. And she understood the value in just the two of us walking through that crowd happened much quicker, was much more smoothly. We kept a pace. She was very good. She was an athlete. She was a track athlete in high school. So she could move, man. She could get on it and she worked out into a situation like that. And just the two of us could smooth as butter, man. We could just slice. And I really appreciate that she recognized that, because it's a very hard thing sometimes to get people to kind of follow along with some of those ideas or concepts. But you're also right. And especially foreign travel, it's a little easier, for a show, I would say, versus for vacation. For vacation was where I got more resistance on. We want to stay more low key, so we don't really want extra guys. For a show, a lot of times you're able to get the promoter or somebody like that to buy in, to pitch in on that protective side of things, and to convince the promoter that the value is in it for him to provide additional security. And so you get the local promoter to pay that bill, and then you can get your additional resources. But if you're just there for something low key or for vacation, it becomes very difficult to convince the camp, because as was mentioned before, it comes out of their pocket.
Yep.
And you want to know what one of those budget looks like for somebody of that stature, even to just keep a quality guy on staff and some residential security. That bill adds up quick, man. It's expensive.
So someone is asking, Alan Kelly says situational awareness is all encompassing. Absolutely. Nick says, have to drop for my new one-on-one, Rich. Well, have a good one, Nick. Let's see. Jennifer says, thank you for your service, Gage.
Yep.
Dan asked, how often are you on the road?
So there was a subtle reference to me in mid Todd Fox conversation, where when I worked for Jennifer in particular, there was an entire year where I only had 5 days, and I use this term loosely, off. There were 4 days where I was allowed to go on vacation, because there was a thought they were actually going on vacation, and there was a thought we'll be okay. And that was some naivety in a new person being cycled into the scenario that didn't understand or appreciate that they wouldn't be okay.
Yeah.
And so 4 days into my 7 days off, I was called and said, can you please come? We're having some issues. So I had those 4 days off at the beginning of the year, let's call it March. And there just happened to be one day in October that I was on call but didn't get called. Every other single day of the year, I showed up to work. And we would move about every 3 days. Even in New York, we did a lot of filming TV filming, and we would spend some days in the city, and we would go out to the Hamptons, or we would go down to Miami, or we would go, we were cycling in and out of a Vegas residency at the time. So we would hop on a plane and go to Vegas, do a few shows over the weekend, and then go back to New York and film all week. So that job, and saying that I worked every day for the entire year, it wasn't just show up at a 9 to 5. It wasn't just even a lengthy day where it's generally comfortable, man. That was the most intense stretch of really, really baptism of what this job is all about. And I'm so grateful for the job that I have now because of that experience. I have a phenomenal family that I work with now. And they treat me extremely well, and are very conscious of my time and what time it takes to get burnt out. I did share this with you last night, and I think it's important to share here. We talk about, and I laugh because, so if you know anything about the state of Tennessee, the Cooper brothers, John Cooper is the mayor of Nashville and Jim Cooper is the senator. I'm pretty sure that's the way it is. But anyways, when you guys mentioned Colonel Cooper, who, is generally viewed as the father of this concept of the combat mindset and the colors that are associated with the combat mindset. You guys mentioned his name, and I'm like, I don't know who this Colonel Cooper guy is, but anyways, I am familiar with the concept of the combat mindset and the color scheme that's associated with it. And for me, I had been told it before, but never appreciated it. And I got to a point in a workup for, I guess, the workup for my second deployment. We were sitting in a group setting with 3-2. I was a sergeant. I was on the intel side, so I was a support element, just going through the workup. That we were at the range this particular day, and you had to do all of this pre-deployment training. And so as we name any corporal that you don't know his last name within the Marine Corps that you can't recall his last name, Corporal Schmuckatelli, we call him, was giving this class, and friggin' dog-ons and pacing back and forth very, properly, as he was giving his period of instruction. And the most impactful thing that he said during that entire talk about combat mindset, which was the class, was he said the Secret Service are only allowed to be on shift for X amount of time because of the amount of time that you can be in a red mindset. So I don't want to, if you want me to touch on it, I can. But basically, if we understand the color schemes, it goes from white, which is kind of a completely oblivious, to a yellow, which is a general state of alertness, to an orange, which is a more focused alertness, to red, which is kind of you're in the middle of some sort of anguish, whether it's rush hour traffic or whether it's a firefight. And then there's black, where you have completely exhausted your body's capacity to continue on at that state, and you've got to dial it back and reset yourself. And so his reference was to the red state, and he gave it an amount of time, and I'm just going to give it 15 minutes or maybe 30 minutes, probably depending upon how well you've trained your body and your mind to survive these high stress situations. Nowadays, mine driving through rush hour traffic in Nashville in the mornings is about 15 minutes. Yeah. And then by the time I get to work, I feel like I've worked out just because of that portion. I drive an hour and a half commute into work, but it's not the first hour and 20 minutes. It's the last 10 that gets me. But regardless, I've found this out when I worked for Jennifer. So I've told this whole story to tell you, if you truly observe what happens to yourself when you are extremely stressed and you identify, man, the last 15 minutes, I just feel like I was in this high stress situation, and now I feel like I'm completely exhausted and that I'm not aware of what's going on. You've just found your red and you're really, truly, you're black. And it's a great observation if you can ever find yourself in that scenario, because this happened to me in working with Jennifer. I would identify that, man, we'd be on set in New York, and you're trying to be as vigilant as possible. You're trying to see everything, man, like people sneaking onto set to get a selfie with her and things like this. you hear certain noises in the background. You're in New York City, so there's all sorts of noises and sounds and yelling and these things that naturally occur, but you have to determine what it is that what's the actual meaning behind all of these sounds that you hear. And it's overwhelming. Mm-hmm. It's intense and it's overwhelming. That walk through that crowd in Capri that you can reference. You want to talk about super, super on high alert, because every single hand that goes out to reach towards her, you're just IDing the hand. It's not always nefarious. It's just the mental process of processing every single hand that reaches, that extends towards, so you're not some like push every person away kind of guy, but that doesn't mean that you're not mentally processing every single thing that's happening. And when we got through that walk, I was like, holy crap, that was exhausting. And it was the first time I understood exactly what that meant. You can be taught something years and years and years and years, and it's not until you experience something like that you're like, oh, well, that's what that means. Mm. And now I can apply that to driving a car. Mm-hmm. And that was the easy way that I explained it to Grant last night, was like, you're driving a car. White is you're just sitting in the car's running, you're listening to music, you're not paying attention. Yellow is you're driving, you're generally aware that you're driving along, and but you're maybe listening to a podcast along the road. There's not much traffic around you, so you don't have to really pay attention to what's going on, but you're driving. Orange is some light traffic, but you're likely not doing anything but focusing on driving in that moment, because there's enough going on from a traffic standpoint. And then red is that rush hour moment where you're trying to get through traffic and your stress levels become elevated, and you may say some things that you might regret afterwards, or make some, hand gestures that make you feel more comfortable in the moment, but that may not be so flattering. And so that progression, I apply it to different moments of stress. Nowadays it's touring is more heavy, something that we're doing. So that was, I answered a really long-winded question about how often are you on the road. I think maybe we transition. Now it's a lot focused towards touring, in a touring schedule. So luckily out of Nashville, we typically tour on weekends, and we're back home during the week if we can swing it, especially if we're touring more locally, Atlanta, Charlotte, even as far as Florida and things like that. We'll cycle it to where we end up back here for a few days and get some rest. But just the op tempo, working for Jennifer could keep you in that orange state all along, and so it kept you bouncing back between orange and red pretty consistently. And that's rough. It's rough on your body. It's rough on your mental state. And by the time I got out of that job, I was so exhausted, man. I did one of those lettings where my body just let everything go for a couple of weeks after that.
Well, you could have, you can get adrenal fatigue and have hormonal imbalance from being in that state for too long. I mean, you got to cycle in and out. And that's one of the things when I was talking to Todd Fox, and of course I was mentioning Gage, because I knew the tempo that he was on. He and I would be talking. He's in New York, and the next day I'm talking to him, he's in LA, and the next day I'm talking to him, he's in Vegas. I'm like, dude, there's no way I would want to do what you're doing. But I want to circle back to something as far as, you're talking about the stress responses and being in that rush hour traffic and all this kind of stuff. I think that as a young police officer, I would see people that they're driving 90 plus miles an hour through a 30 mile an hour zone to get to the wreck. And I'd be like, hey, bro, you can have a wreck on the way to try to help somebody. So sometimes, we've talked about this before many times, you got to slow yourself in the situation down.
Yeah.
You're not going to do anybody any good. Like if my wife's pregnant, she's about to give birth, and I got to get her to the hospital right now, and I crash and kill us both. I mean, it does nobody any good. So was there ever a time when you had to slow a client down or speed a client up, or use speed as a weapon, for lack of a better term? Maybe not a client, maybe a situation.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm not following the same train of thought at the
Okay,
moment. But
let me give
basically-
you one.
All right.
So we did a show, because I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday. We did a show, Bump in the Night, where I come out and there's some meth head trying to steal my truck. And you can go back and watch it. It's called A Bump in an Hour, an American Warrior show. And I come out and I surprised the guy. I didn't know he had parked his truck at the end of my gravel driveway, exited it, and came up to my truck to do whatever he was trying to do. So I came out the back of my house and surprised him. If you've been listening to the show, you probably heard it before. I had to slow this guy down because he's tweaking. He's wanting to walk up on me and all this other kind of stuff. And, you know, he's drugged out of his mind. I had to slow that guy down. It would have done no good to start MFers and screaming. And he was already agitated. I need to bring this guy down. Let's slow him down. But there are sometimes I need to speed this up. And the example we did another show with an amazing CrossFit athlete and BJJ guy who catches somebody else robbing his truck. And he immediately goes up, does a double leg takedown, and now he's a fight and a knife comes out and all this other stuff. So he chose the other way, to speed the situation up, and it almost didn't work out for him. So I think that speed can be used as a weapon, for lack of a better word, to either, like you said earlier with your interrogation, sometimes I have to ramp it up, sometimes I have to slow it down or bring it down. That's kind of what's going on.
You know, I don't know about the speed up side. I don't know that I have a great example that I want to tell. I can think of one in particular, but I don't necessarily want to tell it, and not because of NDAs, more because I don't want to be that self-deprecating. But but it was in the spirit of protecting not just the client but also the kids. And I used some evasive driving to get away from paparazzi who were following us, and I didn't want them to follow us to the kids' school. And I actually stopped the car middle of Sunset Boulevard, and this again is not told out of machismo because it's probably not a good idea whatsoever. But I stopped the car middle of Sunset Boulevard, got out, walked back to the paparazzi, and I said, "Do not follow us." I said, I'm going to the kids' school, and you will not be behind me when I get there. And it's either you stop following me now, or I will get away from you. And again, I didn't mean that out of like, oh, I'm such a BA guy that I can get away from you. I just meant I'm trying to protect the kids here. Like, please don't. And maybe I said it even more like that instead of the version that I gave you initially. But regardless, they continued to follow me. And as I broke onto the 405, I was able to get away from them by speeding things up, if you will.
Yeah.
But anyway, slowing down, I think of slowing down in the concept for me in that scenario of the paparazzi. The paparazzi are always just trying their best to stay with you. They don't want to lose you because they're going to lose their shot. So they are dealing with a very high level of, elevated, energy coming into any situation. If they're behind you, that's how they feel because they're about to get their shot. Man, their livelihood is about to happen. Their next paycheck is about to come to them. And so I have this really funny, actually a couple, one in Miami and one in New York, of just a sea of paparazzi, and I can recognize, half of them. And I had a scenario when I was in LA recently with my current client. I was walking, just me and the nanny and the kids, back from a coffee shop, and a guy yells out, "Hey, I see you," out of a car window. And it's a New York paparazzi guy in LA. And so then it was funny. He circled back and he sat outside the hotel where we were staying because he saw us go in. And he was curious, I'm sure, as to who I was with because he recognized me.
Uh-huh.
But regardless, that you get to know these guys is the point. And it's almost like, some of the intel background, I think, plays into this a lot, where, in Vegas, and this is, maybe someone would hate me saying this, which is fine with me, but I became known as the nice security guy in Vegas because we were there for 3 years on and off. And you had these guys that would roll in, and it's this just very overbearing, oppressive version of, you're going to answer the call every time we ask for something. And while the client while you want to satisfy that out of the client, it doesn't mean that you have to treat the people that you interact with every day. And this extended in my version to the paparazzi. Just because the paparazzi were a nuisance didn't mean that I had to mistreat them and be ugly towards them and things like this. I didn't have to shove them or any of these things. And the biggest thing I would do, I've said all that to say, the biggest thing I would do is as soon as we could land, I would get out of the car with that same fury that they would, and I would just stop. I'd be like, guys, welcome. I would shift them, and what I took on, what I recognized over time was you're just managing that chaos.
Yep.
If you can manage it in some way to keep the client from being in danger in any way, and we're talking about being in danger from simply two guys running in opposite directions and running slap into them. That has been the case as much as like someone with some nefarious intention trying to get close. It was more often just for safety as much as it was for security, to keep them from, this mayhem that ensues. We stop on the street in New York City going into the NBC building, 30 Rock. And they just rush. They come straight at you. And if you're too quick to pull that door open and try to get inside, you're going to be in the mix of all that chaos that happens. If you'll give it a couple seconds, and she was good about this. She was great about this. A lot of her things I learned. So I wasn't, I didn't implement a lot of the things. It was things that she gave me time that I didn't know I needed initially, but learned that it was a huge advantage to me. To be able to set the paparazzi. Okay, everybody over here, one long wall. You'll all get your shot. You mess with me, you'll never get a shot again. I will mess with you back. And it's that it was done out of kindness, and all those guys, to some degree appreciated that. Again, a less flattering video. We arrived at LAX very, very early on, soon after I'd gotten the job, and I was emphatically asking them to move out of the way. You can hear me on the video. And having watched that video afterwards, I'm like, why was I yelling? Like, why was I doing it that way? And it was because I was less experienced and because I didn't have a lot of dealings with the paparazzi at that time. So those experiences will certainly cycle in. I told the story. After I left that job, I went and started in the process of working for another well-known group who does protective services. And during their training, I got the sense that some of the guys that were there conducting the training weren't fond of me. And it wasn't personal. It was that I literally didn't fit the body type, I think, of their guys. They wanted guys to be more medium build. Some of the same things I did within the Marine Corps, it came down to appearance more than it came down to my skill sets. And, at the time I was just rolling off of having worked for Jennifer for 3 straight years. Like, there are very few opportunities that you get in this capacity to work for someone of that stature, to gain all of the experiences that you gain of all the award shows, every single music and acting award show. You've done on-set security in all of the major cities. You've done movies in major cities. You've done a residency in Vegas. You've done, video shoots and music shoots and all of these things that you gain experience doing. Whereas if you have other clients, you may have a music client and you get half of that experience. You may have an acting client and you get half of that experience. I was in a very unique position where I had literally done it all in a very short amount of time. Excuse me. I often tell people I gained about 10 years of experience just by working for her specifically. And that I never go into a situation. I often go in thinking I know way less than what I do. And there are those moments that we've talked about that kind of validate, no, you're okay. And I'm always seeking how I can get better, and often finding in some scenarios that you've got enough knowledge, just continue to employ it properly. Yeah. And so there, I have dealt with some kind of self-doubt in some of those areas. Shooting hand-to-hand being a couple of them. There was a story, I won't belabor this podcast with the story about the hand-to-hand guy from the same scenario, but I got the sense a couple of weeks later, I was driving in the car, and I got the sense that there was a period of instruction we were in the middle of, and the guy giving the instruction was, now, if you're with a client, would you want to show up in paparazzi photos looking like this? And he did that about 3 times during the period of instruction. I'm pretty sure after the fact that he was talking about me the whole time. And he was one of those guys that kind of overtly gave the impression that he didn't appreciate me being there. But I took it all in stride, and I'm well aware, and this is something I said a little bit ago, but you can find us leaving a restaurant, let's say in Miami, you can see a timeline. You can see the first one where I'm being more aggressive than I should have been, trying to get a paparazzi guy to move out of the way. And then there's one from a year later where you don't even see me in the photograph, but I know for a fact I was there.
Yeah.
And so there's this evolution of experience, and I don't mind telling the bad with the good. I don't mind leaving the impression that there is certainly some steep learning curve to some of this stuff.
So let's see. Dan says most body types of high profile types seem to be large framed guys. I'm surprised to hear an outfit prefers medium frame guy. Is that more prevalent for the clients that prefer to stay under the radar?
Yeah. So I dealt with this when I was kind of in search for a new gig, or new job even. And I actually think I made the mistake in one case of telling people we were doing a video interview, and I mentioned my size, and they said, well, what do you mean your size? And I said, I'm not the smallest guy. And I told you a while ago, I do have this self, image of I'm about a medium build guy, but I guess I'm not. And so there are companies out there, especially Silicon Valley type companies with the C-suite folks, the executives of those companies. There's some of those guys that prefer a team that can operate covertly. Mm-hmm. And from the Intel world, I don't want to mix, terminology and things like that, but they definitely, the job interview was for a covert team where the guy is aware that he has security, that he's being provided security, but he doesn't always even know who the guys are. So he can go into a restaurant and there's a team of guys in the restaurant and he doesn't know who they are. And it's a bit more difficult to do, to blend in at times if you have size, according to these guys. And what I was expressing to them was I felt like I had a unique knack to kind of fit in the shadows, if you will, of handling my size within the scope of I could fit in. I could find ways to be a large guy, but to look completely natural and normal. There are other cases where some guys have recognized, I think Todd is a great advantage and a great resource for this, in that he's a medium frame guy, but he has a lot of skill. And I think there are some clients that have begun to recognize that those guys with that skill set, you can't replace that with size sometimes. Yeah. Now, I think the other is actually true in that story that I did tell about the hand-to-hand guy. I think he recognized that just maneuvering a guy that weighs 300 pounds can be taxing.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of weight to get out of the way, even if you have a great skill set.
That's right.
So I think there's a lot of balance. I think it's very client dependent, but there has been kind of an awakening, an awareness, especially on the executive side. I think more so than the celebrity side. I think the celebrity side, you still often get, I won't tell the guy, but a prominent rapper was kind of around for a period of time, and I didn't work with him directly. I interacted with him for probably 6 weeks or so, and got to know his security staff. And I asked the guy, how'd you get into this work? And how'd you get lined up with this? And I'm talking about the highest of the rap world. How'd you get tied up into this? And they had a solid team of dudes. One of their guys, if I had the opportunity to work with him today, I would call him and work with him, or I'd go work with him, anything. That guy was a phenomenal guy, Canadian guy. But this other dude who's more often with the client, I said, how did you get into this? He said, man, I just had a reputation for knocking dudes out in Atlanta. I said, I said, wow, I didn't know that was an option. I've wasted 15 years of gaining experience and knowledge and all these things. And I could just knocked a couple dudes out at clubs in Atlanta and been fine. Reaching the height. But anyways, I think to answer Dan's question, that's pretty good in the sense of it just, I think the clients are more aware nowadays than ever of that if you have the 6 inches between your brain working better than, whatever 6 inches you may be taller or whatever poundage you may be heavier than other dudes, you have an advantage.
Yeah. So Gage, we've been on here for almost 2 hours, man. What is some of the takeaways for folks watching or listening today, as far as some of the translatable skills from what you've done in your professional life to what the average Joe or Jane on the street?
I don't know where you're going with it. I know I'm definitely not going to leave the podcast without this one thing. And I think that it's super important to me, and it comes from my time transitioning into the intelligence world. And it has to do with everyday life. It most influenced how I became a practitioner within the intelligence world, and it has become invaluable within the protective services world. And it has to do with the concept of bias. And of all the things, I think the combat mindset thing that we touched on is extremely valuable, and building your self-awareness of what situations you fall into, what situations you come into contact with in your everyday life, where you can begin to recognize what are stressful situations and begin to gauge yourself how long it is you can be in that stressful situation before you begin to falter. For me, the most foundational piece that ever was that I was given was this concept of bias. We were in a class. I had just left 3-8. It was in the little short period of time, but between that and me actually going to begin the school, 17-week school, for this intelligence field. And we're sitting there, and there's this gunny. I'll call him Paul. I don't know if he wants to be identified or not. So Paul was teaching this class to us, and he was trying to relate what I think I'm trying to relate now to a bunch of brand new guys who probably knew nothing about getting information from people and how to begin to start to do that. And so he takes this little double shot can, little Starbucks double shot can. You can find it at pretty much any convenience store, from the table, and he just sweeps in one fell swoop. He just sweeps it off the table and tosses it across the room. And me, being oddly stoic at times, reach up with my left hand and snatch it out of the air, and just held it exactly where it hit my hand and just stared at him. And he was most impacted by in the moment, in that short moment, by the occurrence that somebody actually caught it. He wasn't even sure when he did it that it was going to be caught, but it played directly into what he was the point he was trying to make. He said, "What made you do that? Why did you reach up and catch that can in that way?" I said, "I don't know. You threw it and I caught it." He said, "Exactly." He said, "Now, somewhere along the line, hopefully you had a dad that taught you, somebody throws something, you catch it, maybe with a glove on, or football or basketball, or typically something to do with sports. So your brain no longer thinks object or ball or anything. It sees something traveling through the air, and you're inclined to just reach up and catch it out of the air." And the point he was making was, in the concept he drew from that, was that you are filled with these mental shortcuts. And so you've played this exercise, I know, on the recruiting side of, how do you go into a city and begin to start asking kids that may have zero inclination to join the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. How do you overcome this concept of, I don't really know any kids, or may have been thrust into a place that you don't really assimilate with any of the people from this town, or you may not look like them, you may not talk like them, anything. How do you begin to understand them? And, especially growing up as a white kid in the South, in Alabama, of all places, it is probably, movie wise, other than Mississippi, it might be the most racist, movie version of racism that there is. And I was very aware of that, having grown up as a white guy in the South. And so when you walk into a room and you say, who in here is biased?
Uh-huh.
And, I raise my hand because I know the question he's asking. It's not because I feel like I'm full of what I want to later kind of veer off of his prejudice. I understand that I have bias in the sense that I see somebody and I think something.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the connection he was wanting to draw, is when you see somebody, when you see something, when you walk into a village and you see a 2-story mud building, what do you think? What is the mental shortcut that you have to think this? And I parlayed this the other day to kind of continue to draw the analogy to, we talk often about the right to carry guns and all these things. For some reason, there's a skill set associated with so many things in life. If you want to be a trash man, there's a skill set associated with being a trash man. If you want to be a CEO of a company, there are education levels and skill sets that are associated with being a CEO of a company. For some reason, it has been deemed that every single person has a skill set to drive a car and the right to do so. Guns, not so much. But for some reason, cars, a much larger weapon in my estimation, are. But the reason I say that is because we're full of these mental shortcuts when driving a car. And what you begin to see when you drive a car, if you've ever had some frustration, is likely because the mental shortcuts that someone else is using to operate this automobile is different from what yours are.
Yeah.
When I think I'm going to change lanes, this is the process. This is the shortcut I go through, because I don't think, okay, guys, now I'm going to change lanes. It's like the driver's ed version versus the I'm 40 years old version.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just change lanes.
Right.
I without thinking, check mirrors, turn my blinker on, change lanes. So think about it in kind of that context of, there are things that you instinctively do, and that is bias in its rawest form. And so, walking around since these days, from an intelligence perspective, that was something that impacted me so profoundly when I was getting into the intelligence field. And what it led me to do is every time we would get into a new place, Iraq, Afghanistan, different places in Iraq in particular, I would just sit down and talk to people. My first meeting with anybody, whether it was a town mayor or someone who I wanted to see more discreetly, or an interrogation, first thing I would do is just ask them about themselves and about the place where they lived. And it wasn't in an effort really to gain some sort of baseline per se, even though it was helpful for that. It was more geared towards, let me just understand this person.
Mm-hmm.
Let me get to know this person. I think that's what made me more successful then. And I think as I travel nowadays, I've gone to places that I never would have imagined going. My sister's never really been out of North Alabama. Had I not joined the Marine Corps, had I not, jumped in feet first to this protective services world, I never would have went to New York City and spent as much time as I have in Los Angeles. Even though I finished my time at Camp Pendleton, I never really ventured off into Los Angeles in the way I have, and to meet people from, South Central Los Angeles, and to meet people from the inner city of New York. And I did tell you this last night. A couple of the best relationships that I had on my Afghanistan team were guys that didn't have a similar background, or for that matter, the same skin color that I did.
Yeah.
And they were exceptional practitioners of the job. They were great intelligence guys.
Mm-hmm.
One I'll call Red and one I'll call Sonny D. Each one of them from very East Coast background, West Coast background, from more of a city environment than certainly what I grew up in. Each one of them were exceptional, and I credit it to their ability to have seen so many different things and have a much wider variety of experiences than I had. And I recognized, in seeing that just how confined, or not confined, but how structured my upbringing had been, and not for a bad thing. It was just an observation that I had really enjoyed, to some degree, the fact that I didn't have to deal with a lot of things that a lot of kids in this world have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
But the bias side of that is you're taught to think something about the city when you're from the country, you're thought to think,
Mm.
taught to think something about the city.
Mm-hmm.
And by my estimation, people from the city think something about people from the country.
Oh yeah.
And so bias became that kind of foundational element to everything that I do, and understanding that concept of the mental shortcuts that you've created in your mind. Don't let that be a barrier for who you can build a relationship with. Probably my most challenging day, that's not true, but one of the more challenging times in working for Jennifer was we had went to Miami, and I was going to take them to the gym, and it was a gym that one side of the camp was familiar with and I was not. So I wanted to go and just get a lay of the land, and same thing, I always tried to do the best I could at getting out and doing a little advanced work. So I went over and I was trying to seek out the person who owned or managed this gym. So I walked in and there was a guy there at the front, and I asked, "Is there a manager around?" And he played the game of, "Can I help you with something?" And I was like, "No, I'd rather just, if it's okay, I'd rather just speak to a manager. It's nothing bad. I just would prefer to have the conversation with, somebody in management." And this guy comes around, and it's another bad story, by the way, telling on myself a bit, but I don't know how else to relate some of these things that lessons learned are most usually best learned when you make a mistake. I don't know that made a mistake, but anyways, I asked for this guy. He comes over and I begin to talk to him, and I'm like, "Look, client X and Y are going to come over, and they're going to, work out. And I just wanted to know, are there options for entry and exit that I should be aware of?" He's like, "I don't know you." I was like, "I know, I just told you who I am." Yeah. And I'm just trying to get to, when they come over, "Well, how do I know that you are who you are?" And I was like, "Bro, I am this person." And he really pressed back to say, and rightfully so, "You could be the paparazzi that might think that they're coming over here, and I'm just going to give you all the information you need. Like, I literally don't know you." And I understood that, but I didn't know how to break through to him. And finally, I just gave up, and I was like, "Bro, look, I don't know. Maybe Google me."
Yeah.
And so that's the joke. I think you shared that a while ago, like, look it up. But so I left, and I actually had to back out of the situation because the tension was raising. Yeah. And I certainly didn't want it to reflect badly upon the client at the time, and I would stay sheer far away from that. But anyways, it was this mental shortcut in his mind of, who is this guy, and the security of the scenario versus, like, what can I do to dissuade or lower the stress level of this situation. And I came back later, and he's sitting on the big tire that they use for the, hitting the tire with a sledgehammer these days. It seems like a little fun activity, but he's sitting there, and they go inside, and he looks up and he goes, "Bro, so I actually Googled you, and you were kind of right." And, so it was another one of those validating moments that I was like, I don't know if that was the right way to do it, but it works. But anyways, it was a neat way for me to experience, like, a different mentality of a different group of people. I hadn't been in Miami much. And he had a bit of a Hispanic background, and if you've dealt with people in Miami much, you begin to understand the type of people they are and how they're wired and things like that. And so spending time learning people and understanding, most importantly, what my biases were, so that I could try to, as best I could, it's very difficult, but eliminate as best I can any of those biases. And this was kind of my final point to you, was my opinion is, or my estimation is, or the way that I like to characterize it is, that prejudice is how you utilize that bias. It's how you enact that bias. Prejudice, in my opinion, is negative or positively can lead you to either bettering the situation or making it more negative, based on how you process that bias. If you allow that bias to overcome you in your actions, then you've exercised prejudice, in my opinion, in a negative fashion. But if you utilize that bias and you try to eliminate it in some way, or you use it to your advantage to get to know someone who you may be less familiar with, then I think that is a true foundational piece for the intelligence world, for being a Marine, standing a guard post, for protective services. If I'm willing to eliminate my bias out of the way that I action my job, then I can become a better practitioner, because I can recognize that this person may not look like me or feel like me or sound like me or be as tall as me or be as overweight as me, or whatever. I can begin to resonate with this person. I can build rapport with this person by understanding my own bias and understanding that he may have biases about our encounter, and try to eliminate those as best as possible.
Yeah, one of the leadership traits we talked about last night in the Marine Corps is know yourself and seek self-improvement. And I think that kind of lends itself to the bias thing. If you know and you're cognitively aware that you have these biases, whether it's nature or nurture, then okay, I'm cognizant of them. I appreciate it, and sometimes they're gonna help me make those mental shortcuts, and sometimes they may be putting stumbling blocks in front of me from developing and exploiting a relationship. One of the things we often do, Gage, is best day, worst day. I know that I think Gerald had asked if we could do that. Do you have a best day, worst day?
I do have a worst day. I don't know that I should tell the complete story, but basically it's centered around, I found myself in a situation where I would have never put myself in that scenario, and against the wishes of the client. The client desired to be in a different vehicle at the time. I was kind of forced to be separated from the client. And a scenario happened. Nothing bad per se happened, but a scary-ish situation happened. And I replay that day time and time and time again to see, even if the client wants to do something that's different than what you would do, how do you prepare yourself for getting around that? How do you prepare yourself for being better at that? And I know that's not a very detailed story, so it's probably not very interesting, but for me, it's one of those days that just you can't get it out of your mind, that you think through it time and time and time again about how you would have done it differently. And it's definitely one of those days for me. And again, I say it's not even because something bad actually happened. It's because the potential for something bad to happen, which is what we all, from American War Society mindset, think of really potential bad scenarios and how to avoid them, or how to detract from them if they do occur. Best day, I mean, look, I worked with one of the most high profile entertainers in the world, and somebody that I respect greatly, and someone who was always extremely nice to me. And there are several best days mixed in there, because it's just an opportunity that I dare say, anybody that's listened this morning probably hasn't been in that scenario, because I know the few people that have, and I haven't seen their name pop through. But man, there are some incredible moments when you have that opportunity. And of course, I temper that with, it was always a job at the same time. But if you ever stopped to look at a sunset at the on the French Riviera, or learn to appreciate that going to Capri is something that a redneck kid from Alabama doesn't always get to do. I tried to be, while I was doing my job, I tried to be aware of what the opportunity was, for that period of time. And I still do it. I still work for clients that, I'm in awe of the opportunities that I get. And so those best days, I don't mean to be cheesy, but they continuously occur for me, because I've learned that I may not have this opportunity tomorrow. I learned to appreciate it for every opportunity that I do get to experience something that, again, some kid from Alabama who just kept taking chances. And this isn't some like battle story of how I've championed my life. I just kept maybe being naive enough to say yes. But I truly, like, there are some sunsets that I've had that I would consider those the best days, that I can't necessarily, mention everyone, because it's been a phenomenal experience, especially for the last 5 years or so. Best days and worst days. I think of, you've had portions of your life like this. I can think of, the best day on the military side is the day that you get home every time, and five fingers, five toes, and you can appreciate. I'm going to belabor this for 1 second, but I had an issue with the NFL, and I'm not going to get political. I want to make this statement because I feel like it's impactful, but we had an issue where NFL players were kneeling during the national anthem and things like that, and my stance was always, they have the right to do whatever they wish to do. My opinion and my stance was always, you gain an appreciation for that reverent moment when you've actually touched the box holding a friend of yours that is draped in that flag and put it on the C-130 to come home to his family, who'll never know him as they ever did before that. And having experienced that moment, it actually truly makes the moment of hearing the national anthem played and seeing the colors raised a real reverent moment for me. And so, while I respect your right and your, in my opinion, less educated, opportunity to use that moment for something else, that's what I use that moment for. And those are the bad days. Those are bad days. When you put that box in that C-130, that's probably the worst days on the military side. That's some rough. I don't mean to end on a sour note, but the best days are certainly the when you step off that plane and you've made it home to your family. So there's that. All right.
No, well
thanks,
said,
Gage,
man.
for
Well said.
for
No,
dampening the.
People need to hear that, man, and I completely get it. I mean, one of my best friends got killed in Iraq, and he was about to pick up first sergeant. So he'd been in forever. He had like 4 gold stars on his combat action ribbon. And, he gets hit. And I just remember, like, how do you kill? His name's Gunnery Sergeant Terry Ball. Like, how do you kill somebody like Terry Ball? How do you kill him? I mean, he was just Superman to me, and anybody that knew and loved the guy. And, so we're standing in front of his casket. It's an open casket. And my son and his son are on the floor, and they're coloring stuff, and he's cutting it out, and he's laying in his dad's coffin, and we're fixing to shut it up for eternity with these little mementos that the son had laid on his dress blues. And then to watch some adult millionaire who's playing a child's game, let's be honest, it's what football is. It's a game you play as a kid. To take a knee, I support the right to do it. I'll form a protective shield around this clown while he does his right, but I absolutely do not agree with it. I think it's misguided. Yeah. There are other ways you can do it. Walk a mile in those shoes. Join the reserves. Be a reserve police officer. And then if you still feel the way you've done once you've carried that pack or worn that shield, then go ahead, pal. But until then, you don't have a frame of reference for what you're saying. And the facts and stats don't bear out what you feel about this current situation. Anyway, we could go on and on about it, but I think it's a good place to end, and I really appreciate you doing that. Where can people follow you if they wanted to?
I'm doing a lot of consulting these days, and so my protective services side of things, I work a lot with different guys, and we didn't get into touching on that. There's a ton of stuff we could talk about, I guess, but I work with Premier Group and Associates out of Miami is primarily how I kind of got into the field and associated with those guys. And it's a phenomenal group of guys that work there. I'm doing a lot of consulting these days from my intelligence background and the intelligence services that I provide through PHYGITAL.com. So PHYGITAL, PHYGITAL, PHYGITAL.com.
It's in the show notes today. Follow the link.
And I mean, you can follow my social media if you want to, but I don't really use it for promotional purposes. The Gage Cobb is my handle on Instagram, at least. So you're welcome to follow me, but I don't. It's not cool. It's not guns. It's not knives. It's mostly me and my kids and cool pictures that I think I take a picture of a sunset or a sunrise every once in a while on the drive to and from work. But anyways, so feel free to follow those things. I'm sure my email address is in the show notes as well. So if you want to email me, it's a little long to say and write down. If you had note-taking gear, I apologize, but just get it out of the show notes
Yeah.
if you want to email me.
Let's see. Alan Kelly says, great information and show. Thank you both. Have a great weekend. Stephanie says, well done. Matt says, thank you guys. God bless America. Gerald says, the last thing you should kneel to is the thing that represents the freedom that men have given their life for. Alan says, well said, you too. Thank you to everybody that watched today's show. It was an amazing opportunity to have coffee and chit chat with one of my best friends here on this forum. Please check out AmericanWarriorShow.com for all of today's sponsors and links to get your discounts to some amazing products that Mike Seekland and I use on a daily basis. And I know many members of ours do as well. Thank you. Special thank you to Gage. And remember, folks, the fight is coming. Be ready.